used to believe there were no words capable of wounding a parent more deeply than "I hate you," but I was wrong, painfully wrong. Because on the evening of December 22nd, at exactly 6:47 in the evening, my daughter looked at me across the glittering kitchen of her new house, a house she did not pay for, and said with a breezy disinterest that stung more than any shouted insult could ever hope to, "Dad, just send money, don't come." She said it while adjusting the gold bracelets on her wrist that I had bought, while straightening the sleek designer dress I had paid for, while preparing herself to attend a Christmas party held by people whose names she could barely remember, but whose approval she craved more than my presence. I stood there in the doorway holding a small box of homemade cookies. The same kind I used to bake with her when she was 5, and insisted on shaking sprinkles over everything until the counter looked like it was covered in confetti. And she looked at the box as if it were a bag of trash I had dragged in from the curb. "I do not need you to be here, Dad," she said, her lips tightening into a thin, polite smile meant for strangers, not parents. "This is a classy event, and my friends are a little sensitive about the energy and aesthetic, so it is better if you do not show up and make it weird. Just send some money for the gifts, please." And before I could speak, before I could remind her of the 20 Christmases I spent building memories with her, before I could say anything at all, she turned away and took a call, laughing in that airy high-pitched way she practiced in the mirror. I did not fight. I did not raise my voice. I simply nodded, placed the cookies on the counter, and walked out with howling silence tightening its grip around my chest. She did not even notice I had left. The cold outside felt cleaner than the air in that house. And as I stepped into my truck, I saw my reflection in the window older. Then I remembered I's tired mouth, pressed in a line I recognized from my own mother, after the last argument she ever had with me before she passed. I drove home in that quiet that crushes sound, where the only noise is the echoes of the things you should have said, but did not, the words you swallowed to keep peace you knew was only an illusion. She did not invite me to Christmas. She did not want me there. She wanted money, nothing else. And the truth of it sat in my chest like a stone that refused to melt even as the heater roared inside the cab. Back home, I looked around my small living room decorated with the same worn ornaments I had used for years, the ones she used to make fun of, calling them vintage in that sarcastic tone that meant old and boring. I sat in the armchair her father used before he walked out of our lives, leaving me alone to raise a daughter who learned early that love was a thing she needed to secure through image and performance rather than truth and loyalty. I picked up the last card she had sent me for my birthday, a thin card with no handwriting of her own, just her name printed neatly below a generic message, as if even her signature was too much effort. I remembered the girl she used to be. The one who cried when her snowman melted, the one who clung to my leg on her first day of school, the one who told me at age 9 she wanted to buy me a house someday when she had money so I could stop working so hard. And I wondered when that little girl had disappeared, replaced by someone who valued my wallet more than my presence. Maybe I had done this. Maybe I had given too much, paid too often, smoothed too many rough edges, shielded her from consequences until she forgot what consequences were. She had grown up believing comfort was a birthright, and parents were background extras in the movie of her life. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I could not taste and looked through the account statements that told a story far clearer than any argument could. Rent payments for her apartment years ago, when she insisted she was paying her own way. Credit card bills from her college days that I quietly absorbed so she could focus on her future. Car repairs, emergency loans, a deposit for that very house she now lived in, the one she told everyone her fiancé had bought, though he had contributed nothing but charm and promises. The numbers added up to a kind of self-betrayal I had never acknowledged until that moment. She had not just taken my money, she had built a world in which my effort did not exist. She lived in a fantasy where she needed me only as a silent benefactor with open pockets and closed opinions. It was then that the decision formed inside me, quiet and strong, like a steel beam laid into the ground of a foundation. I realized that I had been giving her everything except the one thing she needed most: a bottom, a boundary, a moment when the river of easy help finally dried up so she would have to see the stones at the bottom. She told me just send money. So I would stop, just stop, not to punish her but to wake her, Because love with no boundaries is not love, it is enabling. And enabling was killing any chance she had of becoming a woman who could stand on her own 2 feet without leaning her entire body weight on me. The next morning, I went to the bank. I sat with the manager, a man I had known since he was a teenager working his first job as a teller, and I closed every automatic transfer linked to her. Rent assistance gone, credit card authorization canceled, emergency fund link removed, her allowance disguised as a gift ended. I opened a separate account, one she would never see, where all the money I had planned to send her for the next year would now sit untouched and waiting. Not for her to spend, for her to earn. By Christmas morning, the financial support she assumed would always be there would vanish like snow under a hot sun. She would go to buy something and her card would decline. She would call me and I would not answer. She would text me and I would not respond. The silence she had given me would return to her, not out of revenge but out of truth. She believed she did not need me. She would learn what needing meant. That evening, December 23rd, I put on my coat and walked the long road through my neighborhood, past glowing windows and children building snowmen, past families carrying trees into their homes. I could hear laughter from houses where love was uncomplicated by entitlement. I could smell cinnamon and pine. I felt the ache in my bones of another holiday I would spend alone in my small but honest home. When I reached the end of the street, I turned back, paused under the street lamp where the snow glowed gold, and whispered a quiet promise into the cold air. She will understand what it means to ask for only money. She will understand what it means to shut out love. She will understand what Christmas actually means. And she will understand that this was the year everything changed. By the time I returned home, the tea on my table had gone cold. I poured it out, washed the cup, and cleaned the kitchen slowly, methodically, grounding myself in the familiar rhythm of chores that never asked anything of me except presence. As I wiped the counter, my phone buzzed. A message from her. A selfie in a glittery dress at some party with a caption saying, "Wish you could see this, but it doesn't really fit your style. Money for tomorrow, please? Need to get last minute things." A heart emoji. A heart she did not mean. I felt nothing now. No pain, just clarity. I responded with a single sentence. "I love you. See you after Christmas." She replied instantly with a confused question mark, then a second message asking if I sent the money already because she needed it fast. I did not answer. I set the phone face down on the table and let the silence settle. 2 days left until Christmas. 2 days until her world shifted. 2 days until the foundation she stood on, the one she thought was rock solid, revealed that she had been standing on my shoulders the entire time. And I was finally stepping aside. Christmas morning was coming. And she would learn what happens when the money stops. The day before Christmas Eve arrived wearing a sky the color of old tin, a heavy muted gray that pressed low against the rooftops, the kind of sky that foretells snowfall without bothering to warn you in words. I woke before dawn, not because of excitement or anticipation, but because my body had grown used to the rhythm of early mornings alone. I brewed coffee in silence, listening to the familiar hum of the old heater struggling to warm the corners of the house. I stood near the window, hands wrapped around the mug, watching my neighbor's decorations blink in cheerful colors, while the emptiness inside my living room grew louder with each passing moment. Every year before this one, I would set up the same Christmas traditions that meant something only to me, while my daughter floated through her glamorous world, dropping by for 20 minutes at best, and leaving with gifts she barely thanked me for. But this year there would be no quick drop by, no casual hug filled with distance, no polite smile disguising annoyance. This year she had made herself clear. "Don't come, just send money." My phone chimed at 8, not even a greeting, just a question. "Did you send it yet?" A string of impatient dots appeared before I could even place the phone down. I could almost see her tapping her foot, scanning boutiques, mentally tallying the things she needed to buy to impress her friends. When I did not reply, she sent a second message. "Dad, please, I am literally in the store. I need it now. This is important." I turned off the phone, placed it gently on the counter, and took a slow breath that filled my lungs with both sorrow and a strange, quiet strength. I had spent so many years being available at the snap of her fingers, picking up calls I should have let ring, sending money I should have kept, solving problems she created. She was 24 years old and still believed that her life functioned on the divine intervention of luck instead of the constant labor of a mother she dismissed as old-fashioned and out of touch. She did not understand the price of things because she never had to pay. She did not understand the value of time because she assumed mine was endless. She did not understand the meaning of Christmas because she had replaced it with aesthetics and curated perfection. At 9:42, the third message arrived, sharper, colder. If you don't send it now, I will literally die of embarrassment. Do not ruin this for me. I read it twice, my chest tightening with an emotion that was not quite anger but something heavier, something close to grief. To her, money was oxygen. Image was survival. Approval was currency. I had raised her with love, yes, but I had also raised her with too much protection, too many safety nets. I had caught her every time she stumbled, turning her falls into soft landings until she forgot gravity existed. She believed I owed her the illusion she was trying to sell to the world. But illusions have a cost, and illusions collapse the moment the invisible support holding them up disappears. She called next. The sound filled the room as if it were echoing off walls that had overheard this same argument 100 times before. I did not answer. The call went to voicemail, then another, and another. By the seventh call, the angry voice messages began. Dad, what are you doing? Answer. Dad, I need you to send it. Dad, you cannot be serious. Dad, stop being stubborn. This is not the time. You know how important this is. Are you punishing me? That final question lingered in the quiet air like smoke from a candle just blown out. I was not punishing her. Punishment is about control. This was about letting go. Letting her feel the cold without the warmth I used to wrap around her life like insulation. Letting her hear the silence she had forced upon me for years. Letting her face the world she decorated so beautifully, but could not sustain without me hidden behind the curtains, pulling the financial strings. Around noon, I drove into town, not to see her but to purchase groceries for a Christmas dinner I would share with no one but myself. The streets were crowded with shoppers carrying glossy bags and children tugging on mittens. I passed the boutique she loved, the one where dresses cost more than some people earned in 2 months. Through the window, I saw her, standing near a display with her phone pressed to her ear, her expression twisted with frustration as she left another voicemail for me. She looked beautiful and exhausted and lost, and for a moment my heart ached with the instinct to run inside and rescue her from her own panic. But then I remembered her words, delivered without thought, without softness. Don't come, just send money. I stood outside the store for a few seconds longer, my breath fogging the glass, watching her scan the racks with a frantic urgency she mistook for importance. She wanted Christmas to look perfect. She wanted to be perfect. But she had forgotten the truth I had spent decades trying to teach her. Perfection is a lie. Presence is what matters. But she had replaced presence with shallow substitutes until even I became one. I drove away before she could see me. At home, I wrapped gifts for no one. I arranged the ornaments on my modest Christmas tree, each one with a memory attached, each one carrying a story she had long stopped caring about. Her first Christmas ornament, a bell with her baby photo inside. A handmade star she crafted in kindergarten with too much glue and crooked edges. A small wooden angel from my own childhood tree. I hung them with careful hands, touching each one as if to remind myself that love used to live inside her before the world convinced her that material things were more meaningful. Her final message came that night. The tone was brittle. Dad, you are actually scaring me. I need the money. Please do not do this. I cannot deal with this right now. I stared at the screen, at the plead she thought was sincere but was rooted in desperation for what she wanted, not for me. She had not asked where I would spend Christmas. She had not asked if I was lonely. She had not asked if I needed anything. All she cared about was maintaining her facade. I powered off my phone again. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to disconnect without guilt. I made a small dinner. I lit a candle. I sat by the window and watched the snow begin to fall in soft spirals, blanketing the street in white. In that quietness, I felt something shift inside me. A letting go. Not of her, but of the role she expected me to play. She was an adult. Adults learn through consequence. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. On Christmas Eve morning, my phone was filled with new messages. Panic had settled into her voice. Dad, the card is not working. Something is wrong. I cannot pay for anything. My bank is saying insufficient funds. Dad, please help. I am supposed to host Christmas brunch tomorrow for his family and I cannot show up with nothing. Please answer me. I am begging you. I felt the old instinct return again, the one that said pick up the phone and fix it, but I held firm. She told me not to come. She told me she only needed money, but the money was gone now. And there was only one thing left for her to confront: reality. By evening, she showed up at my door. I knew she would. I saw her silhouette through the frosted glass window. Her posture was not angry, it was frightened, fragile. The knock she gave was soft, nothing like her usual confident rhythm. I opened the door slowly. Her makeup was smudged. Her hair was messy from rushing in the wind. Her coat hung unevenly over her shoulders. She looked like a child who had been caught in a storm. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "I think something is wrong. My money is gone. Everything is failing. I cannot pay for anything. I cannot breathe. I do not know what to do." The truth was already beginning its work. I stepped aside to let her in. Not to comfort her, not to rescue her, but to begin the part she had spent years avoiding. The reckoning, Christmas morning, was hours away, and she was about to learn exactly what happens when the money stops. The moment she stepped inside my house, the warmth wrapped around her like something she had forgotten existed. Her shoulders dropped slightly, almost involuntarily, as if the tension she carried was melting just enough for her bones to remember softness. She stood there in the entryway, shivering, looking at the old familiar hallway with the knitted stockings still hanging from the banister, the same ones she once loved tugging at when she was little. She looked around as if she were standing in a place she had seen before in a dream, but forgot how to navigate. I watched her wipe her eyes with trembling fingers, trying to maintain dignity that had already been fractured by panic. She had always been terrified of appearing small. Tonight she already was. She swallowed hard before she spoke again. The words came out in a cracked whisper. "Mom, the bank said something about discontinued payments. I do not understand. My card keeps getting declined. I tried everything. I thought it was fraud. I thought maybe someone hacked my account. But they said no. They said the linked transfers were canceled." I could hear the desperation building under her voice like water rising behind a dam. She did not know yet that the dam had been intentionally broken. She stared at me with wide eyes, searching for reassurance, expecting comfort, expecting me to brush her hair from her face and tell her it was all just a mistake, that everything would be fixed if she just waited a few hours. But tonight was not about rescue. Tonight was about revelation. I walked past her slowly, letting her stand there in the middle of my living room like a guest who didn't yet know where she belonged. I took a seat in the armchair near the fireplace, the one she used to curl up in every Christmas morning with a blanket around her shoulders while she waited impatiently to open presents. She lingered near the doorway, hesitant to come closer, as though crossing the room required an admission she wasn't ready to make. After several tense seconds, she finally stepped forward and sat on the edge of the couch, her hands tangled together so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Mom," she whispered, "why is this happening?" I raised my eyes and met hers. Her face was streaked with mascara, her lips trembling, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She looked so young in that moment, stripped of the adult costume she wore so proudly. She waited for my answer, but I let the silence stretch long enough for her to shift uncomfortably. "You told me not to come," I said softly. Not as a weapon, not as a reminder, just as a fact she had tried to ignore. Her eyes flickered with confusion, guilt, denial, then fear. She sat back slowly, blinking fast. "Mom, that's not what I meant. You know that's not what I meant. I didn't mean it like that. I was stressed. I was busy. You know I love you. I always tell you that." I leaned back in the chair, folding my hands in my lap. She always said she loved me when she needed something. Not when she wanted me. Only when she wanted something from me. She stared at me, waiting to see if her quick revision of history would work. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't coddle, I simply asked a question she wasn't prepared for. "Why did you block me from your Christmas brunch?" She blinked again, harder this time. "Mom, I didn't block you, it was for his family. They're very particular. They're used to certain things, and I didn't want you to feel out of place." I held her stare. "You didn't want me there," I said. "Plain, simple, true." Her jaw tightened. She looked down at her lap, twisting her bracelet around her wrist. She tried again, voice thin and defensive. "Mom, come on. You know how different you are from them. You don't fit in. You would feel uncomfortable." It took everything in me not to sigh. She still didn't understand. She still believed the lie she had been living in for years, the lie that status meant protection, that image meant worth, that I was an outdated accessory she didn't want to display in front of her carefully curated guests. I leaned forward slightly. "What made you think you get to decide where I fit?" The question hit her harder than I intended. She blinked rapidly, her breath shaky. Her voice finally cracked. Mom, why are you being like this? I need help. I'm scared. Christmas is tomorrow. I don't have anything. I don't have money for food or gifts or even gas. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I can't face everyone like this. I'm going to humiliate myself. I'm begging you. Please help me. Her words spilled out in a desperate rush that reminded me of a little girl sobbing because her toy broke. Except now the toy was her entire lifestyle. Her hands trembled as she reached toward me instinctively, but she stopped herself halfway as though she feared she no longer had the right. That pause told me everything. For the first time in years, she doubted her entitlement to me. I waited a moment before speaking. Do you know, I said quietly, that for the last 7 years, every single emergency you claimed happened at the worst possible time was not an emergency at all. They were choices. Choices driven by vanity, ego, fear, and pride. Choices you never felt the weight of because I carried every ounce of it for you. Her head jerked up. What are you talking about? I did not soften the truth. I had softened too much for too long. The apartment you lived in after college, I said. You never paid rent. I did, every month, quietly. You told everyone you worked your way up from nothing, but you never started from nothing. You started from me. She stared at me, frozen. The car you drive, I continued. You said you bought it yourself. But the loan was co-signed by me, the insurance was paid by me, and the repairs were covered by me. Every single one. Her lips parted as if she were about to argue, but no sound came out. The trips you took for birthdays, the down payment on your house, the designer clothes, the emergency dental bill, the lost job you hid from your fiancé's parents, the credit card debt you pretended you had under control, the brunches, the gifts, the parties you insisted were essential for networking. Every bit of it, all of it was me. She shook her head slowly, like she was underwater and struggling to make sense of what she was hearing. Mom, Mom, no, that's not true. That can't be true. He said. I cut her off gently. He didn't know, no one knew, because I never told you. I never asked for credit. I never asked for gratitude. I did it because you were my daughter and I wanted you to have the life I never did. But you took that life and built a world where I became invisible. Her hand flew to her mouth. Mom, stop. Please stop. Her voice cracked again, but it wasn't anger this time. It was shock. It was disbelief. It was the beginning of realizing she had spent years living in a story where she was the unstoppable heroine, not knowing someone else was backstage holding up the entire set. I leaned back and let the next truth come softly, steadily. I stopped the money because you told me you didn't want me. Just what I could give. She broke. Tears streamed down her face in hot, frantic lines. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands covering her eyes as if she could press away the hurt, the humiliation, the realization that she had been walking through her life powered by a support she refused to acknowledge. Mom, I didn't know, she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't know it was that much. I didn't know you were doing all that. I thought I earned it. I thought I was finally making it on my own. You were living on my back, I said, not cruelly, but truthfully. And when you told me not to come, the weight finally shifted. I stepped away, and everything fell. She lifted her face, tear-streaked and desperate. What do I do now? I stood and walked to the window, watching the snow fall thicker now, covering the street in a blanket that made everything look peaceful despite the storm inside this room. I spoke without turning toward her. You start where you should have started years ago. You stand. On your own feet with your own strength, and you learn the difference between needing me and using me. She cried silently behind me, a quiet choking sound that pierced through both of us. Tomorrow is Christmas, Mom, she whispered. What am I supposed to do tomorrow? I turned then, finally meeting her eyes. You come back in the morning, I said, and we start rebuilding. Not your image, not your lifestyle, not your lies, but you. She swallowed hard. Her eyes shined in the dim light of the living room, reflecting a girl who had never once allowed herself to break long enough to grow. Can I stay here tonight? She asked in a soft voice. I shook my head slowly. Not yet, her breath caught. Go home, I said gently. Sit with what you've learned today, and tomorrow we begin. She nodded, even though it hurt her. She wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers and stood. When she reached the door, she paused, shoulders shaking. Mom, she whispered, I'm scared. So was I said. But fear is what pushes us toward truth. She stepped out into the cold night air, and I watched her walk down the snowy path, each step unsteady, her breath visible in the sharp winter wind. She reached her car, leaned against it for a moment, and covered her face with her hands. Then she drove away, her tail lights disappearing into the dark. tomorrow was Christmas morning, and the real lesson hadn't even begun. The night after she left my house unfolded in a silence so thick it felt like its own presence, as if the air around me was holding its breath in anticipation of what dawn would bring. I stayed up later than I intended, sitting near the faint glow of the fireplace, listening to the wood crackle softly as if whispering stories I had forgotten. I thought about her the entire time, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a deep and ancient ache that only mothers understand. She had walked away from my porch looking like a woman whose world had been stolen, when in truth her world had only been revealed for the fragile thing it really was. I wondered if she lay awake that night too, staring at her ceiling, replaying every moment she had dismissed me, every time she had called me old-fashioned, every time she chose her image over her mother's heart. I did not expect sleep, yet when it finally came, it was heavy and dreamless. I woke before sunrise, the house cold enough that my breath clouded in the early morning air. For a moment, I sat on the edge of my bed, listening. The winter wind pushed against the window panes with a low, steady hiss. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. And beneath it all, the faint beating of my own heart reminding me that today was not an ordinary morning. Today was the morning when the lies she lived on finally lost their footing. Today was Christmas. I moved slowly through the quiet house, turning on lights one by one. I boiled water for tea. I folded the throw blanket draped over the couch. I lit the small Christmas candle on the table, its gentle pine scent filling the room with a nostalgia that pierced me as sharply as memory itself. When I passed the little wooden angel ornament she made in kindergarten, I paused. Her handwriting was still on the back, crooked and uneven. For Mom, I love you. I traced my finger over the faded letters, and for a brief moment I saw her as that little girl again, cheeks rosy, hair messy, eyes bright with excitement. The girl who believed Christmas was magic because she was surrounded by warmth, not wealth. I wondered when that child vanished, or if she was still somewhere inside her, buried beneath layers of pride and illusion. The knock came earlier than I expected. Soft at first, then firmer, as if she debated whether to retreat or insist. I opened the door and found her standing there wrapped in a coat too thin for the cold, hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes swollen and glassy. The color had drained from her face, and she looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in spirit, as though the pieces she had built her world upon were scattered around her, and she did not know how to gather them again. She did not ask to come in this time. She stepped inside quietly, almost shyly, as if entering a sacred place. She stood near the doorway, hands tucked into her pockets, avoiding my eyes. I could see the guilt already clinging to her like frost. I could see the fear, too, the fear of consequences she had never faced before. She let out a shaky breath and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Mom." The words trembled in the air as though they weren't sure they belonged here anymore. I nodded but did not answer right away. She stepped further into the living room, looking around at the decorations she once called outdated. Her gaze lingered on the small tree in the corner, on the lights that flickered softly like fragile heartbeat, on the stockings hanging crookedly, one of them with her name stitched by hand when she was barely 2. She reached out and traced the edge of her stocking with a trembling finger before quickly pulling her hand back, as if she did not feel worthy to touch anything. She turned toward me finally, her voice cracking as she spoke. "Mom, I do not know where to start. Everything feels wrong. Everything I thought I understood is gone." I sat down in my armchair and gestured for her to sit on the couch. She sank into it slowly, as if afraid it might reject her. She rubbed her palms against her knees, and for the first time in years, she looked me in the eyes without the shield of superiority she always carried. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, I need you to tell me the truth. Not the kind you cushion with kindness, not the kind you soften so I do not feel bad. I want the truth. All of it, please." I studied her face carefully. She was ready, not because she wanted comfort, but because she needed clarity. I took a long breath before speaking. "You said don't come. You said just send money. Do you remember that?" She nodded, closing her eyes in shame. I continued, "You have lived for years believing that my love would always appear in financial form. That no matter how you spoke to me, no matter how you treated me, I would fill the cracks in your life with money so you never had to feel them. You built your world on the assumption that I would never say no." She wiped her eyes, nodding again, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I didn't realize I was hurting you. I didn't think about how it sounded. I wasn't trying to push you away. You did push me away, not with one sentence, not even with 10, but over years. You pushed me away every time you made decisions without thinking of the consequences because you assumed I would fix them. Every time you treated money like it grew from a tree I tended. Every time you introduced me as your small town mom instead of your mother with pride. Every time you hid me behind the curtain of your new life because you were scared I did not match the image you wanted to present. Her voice rose slightly, desperate and wounded. I didn't hide you. I just wanted everything to go well. I wanted people to see me a certain way. I leaned forward. And what way was that? As someone who did it alone, or someone who was ashamed of the woman who raised her? A sob broke free from her chest. She covered her mouth, shaking as she cried, her whole body trembling like something inside her had finally cracked open. She tried to speak, but no words came out at first. When she finally managed to form a sentence, it was a confession leaking through tears. I was scared they would judge me if they knew where I came from. I was scared they would laugh at me. I was scared they would think I was nothing. Her voice collapsed completely then. And I thought if I could control everything around me, if I could look perfect, if I could sound perfect, then no one would ever see that I came from a small house with old furniture and handmade stockings. I thought I had to leave that behind to become someone. I let her cry because crying was part of the breaking, and breaking was the only path to rebuilding. When she regained her breath, she whispered a sentence she had never said before. Mom, I am embarrassed of myself. Not of you, never of you, of me. I sat back quietly and let the words sink between us. She had never admitted fault without blaming someone else. She had never confronted her own reflection without polishing it first. This was new. This was painful. This was growth. She inhaled shakily. I do not have anything for tomorrow. His family thinks I have everything under control. They think I come from this perfect background. They think I'm successful and organized and generous and capable. I do not know how to tell them the truth. I have nothing to show, nothing to bring, nothing to give. I nodded slowly. Good? She looked up in confusion. What do you mean good? It is good, I repeated, because for the first time in your adult life, you are not hiding behind things. You are standing in front of the emptiness. You are meeting yourself honestly. It is painful, but it is the only way forward. She looked away, her lips trembling. What do I do, Mom? Tell me what to do. I stood and walked toward the small kitchen. She watched me like a child waiting for instructions she did not yet understand. I reached for a simple grocery bag I had prepared long before she had arrived. Inside it were items she had not expected, not luxury gifts, not decorations, not indulgences, basics. Real things, bread, apples, chicken, a simple bag of rice, a jar of honey. I placed the bag gently on the table between us. She stared at it, confused. What is this? She whispered. I answered softly. It is your beginning. She blinked in slow disbelief. Mom, you want me to bring groceries to Christmas brunch? No, I said, you are taking these home. You are cooking for yourself today. You are going to sit at your own table and prepare your own food. You are going to face the truth of your situation alone, not because I want to punish you, but because I want you to see what survives when the image collapses. Her tears pooled again, but she did not argue. I continued, and tomorrow you will go to Christmas brunch with nothing but honesty. No designer gifts, no curated perfection, no facade. You will walk in as who you are, not who you pretend to be. And if they reject you, then you will know exactly who belongs in your life. The realization hit her like a slow, dawning sunrise that burned through fog. She looked broken. She looked humbled. She looked real for the first time in years. Do you hate me? She whispered. No, I said softly. I love you. Enough to stop saving you from your own choices. She nodded slowly, breath trembling. May I come back tonight? She asked softly. Not tonight, I said again. You need to sit with yourself first. It will hurt. It is meant to. She stood, still shaking, still hollowed out by the truth she had tried so hard to outrun. She picked up the grocery bag, holding it like something fragile. She looked at me again, eyes glassy with gratitude and fear. Mom, she whispered, thank you for not abandoning me. I met her gaze steadily. I never abandoned you, I said. I am showing you how not to abandon yourself. She stepped out into the cold, breathing in a sharp slice of winter air before walking slowly toward her car. Her figure looked small against the white snow, but her steps were steadier than the night before. This time she was not running from her life. She was stepping into it. Tomorrow would be Christmas morning, and everything was about to begin. The snow fell through the night, soft and relentless, covering the world in a quiet that felt almost sacred. I stayed awake longer than I planned, listening to the storm move across the valley like a slow exhale from the sky itself. I wondered what she was doing in her apartment, if she sat at her small kitchen table staring at the groceries I gave her, wondering how she had arrived at this version of her life. I pictured her standing over the stove, unsure how long to boil rice because she had spent years ordering meals instead of preparing them. I imagined her walking from room to room, noticing for the first time how silent her home was without the hum of notifications and distractions she hid behind. I wondered if she cried again, or if she simply sat in the dark trying to understand the shape of the ache she carried. Morning arrived slowly, its light muted by thick clouds. Christmas morning. A day she once woke me up before sunrise, tugging at my blanket with barely contained excitement, declaring she heard Santa in the hallway even when she was old enough to know better. Those mornings were filled with warm pancakes, small gifts wrapped in reused ribbons, and the kind of laughter that echoes through years like a song you never forget. Now the house was still. The tree lights twinkled quietly in their corner. The world looked beautiful and lonely all at once. Around 8, my phone buzzed for the first time. I didn't rush to pick it up. I let it ring until it went silent, then checked the screen. It was her. She didn't leave a voicemail, but she didn't need to. I already knew the shape of her thoughts. She wanted reassurance. She wanted warmth. She wanted the old rhythm in which she could break down and I would rebuild her instantly. But today was not that kind of Christmas. She called again an hour later, and again I let it ring. I walked to the window and looked out over the yard. The snow was pristine, untouched, except for a single set of deer tracks leading toward the woods. The silence pressed against the house like a presence wanting to be acknowledged. I let myself feel it. It wasn't loneliness. It was space, space I needed, space she needed even more. I made tea and sat at the table, breathing in the steam. I thought about the years I spent rescuing her from storms she caused, the overdue bills she hid, the landlords who called me instead of her. The relationships that crumbled because she treated affection like a competition and love like a performance. I remembered the one Christmas she brought a boyfriend home who insulted my furniture, my cooking, and even the way I spoke. She laughed at his comments, laughed at me, and only apologized when he left the room. I forgave her then. I forgave her too often. Today was the day I stopped collapsing myself to cushion her fall. Just before noon, her text came through, a single line. Mom, I do not know how to do this. I read it 3 times. I could see her sitting alone in her apartment, wearing a sweater that probably still smelled faintly of the perfume she always overused, her eyes swollen, her hands trembling as she typed. I knew she wanted me to reply fast, to ease the panic she was trying to swallow. I set the phone down and let her feel the quiet. The truth was simple. Growth never comes with a warm blanket. It comes with raw edges and rooms too quiet to escape yourself. I spent the next hour cleaning the kitchen, slicing vegetables, chopping herbs, preparing food for dinner even though I would be eating alone. Every movement felt purposeful, grounding, soothing in a way mothering myself had never been. By the time I wiped down the counters, my hands steady and warm, the doorbell rang. It wasn't her. It was my neighbor, holding a small Tupperware of cookies wrapped in ribbon. She handed them to me with a smile and said Merry Christmas, dear, before walking back across the snow to her house. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the soft flakes gather on her coat, and I realized the world went on even when your heart paused. I placed the cookies on the table and poured myself another cup of tea. At 2 o'clock, she called again. This time she left a voicemail, her voice cracking through the speaker. Mom, I am supposed to be at his parents' house in an hour. They think I have everything under control. I have nothing. I mean nothing. Please answer. Please. I listened to the message twice. The desperation was thick, but there was something new beneath it. Honesty, real fear. Not the kind she exaggerated when she wanted to manipulate outcomes, but the kind that comes from facing the consequences of your own choices. I did not call her back. Instead, I put on my coat and boots, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and stepped outside into the cold air. The snow was fresh and powdery, crunching softly under my feet. The world looked untouched, as if waiting for a new story to begin. I walked down my driveway to the mailbox, brushing snow off its lid. Inside was a single envelope from a utility company. Even on Christmas, responsibility arrives right on schedule. When I turned to walk back inside, I saw a small car coming around the bend of the road. The engine struggled, tires kicking up slush. My heart tightened because I knew that car. She parked crookedly at the foot of my driveway, the tires skidding slightly. She didn't get out at first. She sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead like someone preparing to open a door into a world she feared and needed in equal measure. After a moment, she stepped out, her breath forming faint clouds in the cold air. She held a plastic container in her hands. Something homemade, uneven, wrapped with more intention than skill. Her steps were slow, careful, like each one was a decision. When she reached me, she didn't speak at first. She just held out the container. I made this. Her voice quivered. It isn't fancy. It's actually awful. I burned the first two, and this one probably tastes like cardboard, but I made it. For you. The container was warm in my hands. I could smell something vaguely sweet, slightly overcooked, but undeniably heartfelt. I looked at her. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Her eyes were red but clear. There was no makeup, no pretense, just my daughter. I asked quietly, "Did you eat?" She shook her head. "No, I was too nervous. I kept messing up the recipe. I didn't know how to fix it and I kept crying into the batter." She tried to laugh, but it broke into a sob. "Mom, I don't know how to do anything anymore." I placed a hand on her cheek. The warmth of her skin melted the snowflakes resting there. "You are doing exactly what you need to," I said softly. She took a shaky breath. "His family is waiting. They think I'm perfect. They think I have everything. They think I'm wealthy and organized and a great cook and that my mother spoils me endlessly. They think I bought gifts. They think I booked a spa weekend for his mom. They think I have money. They think I have confidence. They think I'm responsible." She closed her eyes and whispered, "I am none of those things." The confession floated in the cold air like something sacred and fragile. She looked at me again, her eyes pleading. "Mom, what do I do? How do I show up like this?" I took the container from her hands and placed it on the snow-covered hood of her car. Then I looked straight into her eyes, steady and calm. "You show up as yourself," I said. "And if they cannot accept you like this, then they do not deserve any version of you, not even the polished one you've been trying to maintain." She stared at me, tears filling her eyes again. "But what if they judge me? What if they think I am a failure?" I cupped her chin gently, then let them. "Their opinion does not define your worth, but hiding from it will." Her breath hitched. She was shaking, not from the cold but from fear. "The kind that comes when the world she built is finally too heavy to carry," she whispered. "Will you come with me?" It was the question I expected. The question she had been circling around all day. The question that would determine everything about her future. I answered slowly, deliberately. "No," I said gently. "This is a step you must take alone." She swallowed hard, looking down at her boots. Snow gathered in her hair like small white crowns. She looked so young, so vulnerable, so human. She whispered, almost inaudible, "Mom, please don't let me fall." I stepped closer and pressed my forehead to hers. "I will not let you fall," I said, "but I will let you walk." Her shoulders trembled at the truth of that. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve, took a deep breath, and nodded slowly. "All right," she whispered, "I will go." She reached for the container again, holding it to her chest like something fragile and precious. She walked back to her car, slipping slightly on the driveway before regaining her balance. She looked back at me one last time, her eyes carrying a mixture of fear and determination. Then she got in the car, turned on the engine, and drove away. I stood in the snow until her car disappeared around the bend. The silence returned, but it was different now. Softer, hopeful. For the first time in years, she was walking into a room without a mask. And for the first time in years, I believed she might finally discover who she was underneath it. The day was not ending. It was beginning. I stayed outside long after her car disappeared, letting the cold settle into my bones the way truth had settled into hers. The quiet road stretched out before me, bordered by snow-laden pine trees that stood like silent witnesses to the moment my daughter finally faced life without a cushion made from my sacrifices. The world felt oddly still, like the air itself was holding its breath for her. I knew the path she was walking was not an easy one. Growth rarely arrived wrapped in comfort. It arrived raw. It arrived humbling. It arrived in the empty moments between what you were and who you decide to become. When I finally stepped back inside the house, the warmth hit me all at once. The Christmas lights flickered gently, their soft glow illuminating the gifts under the tree that I had placed there the night before. Most of them were for no one in particular. I had wrapped them out of habit, a quiet ritual of love I had performed for years, even when she chose brunches with friends over mornings with me. Now they felt like relics of a world that no longer existed. I took off my coat, set the kettle on the stove again, and filled the house with the smell of pine candle and black tea. The familiarity of it soothed something in me. I sat by the window, watching flakes drift slowly toward the ground, each one reflecting a soft shimmer of winter light. I wondered how far she had driven by then. I wondered if she would turn back. I wondered if she would park somewhere, take a breath, and reconsider the truth she was about to face. But she did not turn back. My phone lit up several times as hours passed. Not with calls, not with messages. With small notifications from a shared location we still had on our phones, one we both forgot to turn off years ago. A tiny dot moving across the city map, paused at a stoplight, paused again near a bakery. Moving again, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. She was going. When the dot finally stopped near a neighborhood with wide driveways, manicured hedges, and brick houses with festive wreaths on every door, I closed my eyes and exhaled. She had arrived. She was standing on the threshold of a world she had constructed on borrowed truths. A world that had always been too fragile to hold the weight of reality. I sat still, listening to the faint hum of the heater and the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. I remembered the first Christmas she had with her father and me. She had been so small she barely understood the idea of gifts. She only cared about the lights and the warmth and the feeling of belonging. She used to curl up beside me on the couch and fall asleep with her head on my shoulder. Back then, she never asked for money. She asked for presents, not presents. Somewhere along the way, the world taught her that value came from performance, not personhood. Somewhere along the way, she traded the warmth of simplicity for the cold hunger of appearances. Somewhere along the way, she forgot who she was. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was just witnessing a turning point she needed more desperately than she understood. 2 hours passed before my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text, short, barely formed, heavy. Mom, they asked where my gift is. My chest tightened, but I did not reply. I needed her to sit with the discomfort. I needed her to find her voice without leaning on mine. Seconds later, another message followed. I told them I didn't bring any. They looked confused. His mother laughed like it was a joke. His sister rolled her eyes. His father said he was sure I had something planned. I said nothing. 5 minutes passed, then another message. Mom, they asked who paid for my college. I didn't know what to say, then. I told them you did, my throat burned. Not because she finally told the truth, but because for the first time in years she said it without shame. More messages came. They asked where you work. I said you're a bookkeeper. They asked what kind of car you drive. I said an old Honda. They asked why you didn't come today. I didn't know how to answer. Then another message. I told them the truth. I told them I said something terrible to you. I told them you didn't deserve it. I told them I hurt you. I exhaled deeply. She was doing it. She was stripping the layers of falsehood like old wallpaper and letting the cold air hit the bare walls beneath. Minutes later, another message arrived. His sister laughed at me, said I should get over it. His mother said everyone says things they do mean. His father asked why you would take it so personally. Then, I told them because you're my mom. A slow warmth spread through my chest the way a candle melts ice, but I still didn't reply. This was her battle. Her eyes opening, her world shifting. Then a longer message came. Mom, he pulled me aside. He said I embarrassed him. He said I should have lied. He said no one needed to know my past. He said appearances matter more than feelings. He said you were dramatic for stepping back. He said I should be grateful I don't have to rely on you. My jaw tightened at that, not from anger, from sadness, from clarity. Then, Mom, he said the words I always feared. He said I wasn't enough on my own. Her last message that hour was short. Mom, can I come home? I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down. I didn't call her back. I didn't reply. She wasn't ready to come home. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because she still didn't know what home meant. She still thought home was an escape. Home needed to become a choice. The hours stretched into afternoon. The sun began to set early, casting long shadows across the living room. I was slicing vegetables again, preparing a simple dinner, when the doorbell rang. Her car wasn't in the driveway. That meant she must have walked. The storm had eased, but the temperature had dropped. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped toward the foyer. When I opened the door, she stood there without a coat, her cheeks red from the cold, her hair wind tangled, her fists clenched in trembling determination. She looked nothing like the polished woman she tried to present to the world. She looked like the girl who used to run home after school crying because someone had teased her about her shoes. She looked like the girl who needed her mother. Her voice broke the moment she opened her mouth. They laughed at me. The words were simple, quiet, but they carried a lifetime of weight. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her with shaking fingers. She didn't wait for permission. She walked straight to the living room, collapsed onto the couch, and buried her face in her hands. I stood a few feet away, waiting, not hovering, not soothing too quickly, letting her breathe through the pain, letting her hear her own heartbeat, letting the silence wrap around her like a blanket woven from truth. She finally lifted her face, eyes swollen, voice cracking. Mom, I walked out. I didn't even say goodbye. I just stood up and left. I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want to pretend. I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to shrink myself so they could feel bigger. I didn't want to hide you. Her shoulders shook as she continued. I realized something. I wasn't embarrassed of you. I was embarrassed that I stopped being like you. You survive, you work, you live honestly. You don't shape yourself around what other people expect. I shaped my entire world around what other people think. She covered her face again, and now I don't know who I am. I finally moved toward her, sitting slowly on the edge of the coffee table so she couldn't look away. My voice was calm and steady. You are someone who has finally stopped running. She shook her head, tears spilling again. I am someone who ruined everything. No, I said softly. You are someone who realized what mattered before it was too late. That is not ruin, that is rebirth. She took a shaky breath, staring at the floor. Mom, I left my shoes in their hallway. I just walked out. I didn't care. I just needed to leave. I smiled gently. Good. Shoes can be replaced. Integrity cannot. She let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. Mom, please tell me what to do next. Please tell me how to fix this. I leaned closer. You do not fix this overnight. You rebuild yourself one honest choice at a time. And you start by resting, by being real, by learning to live without pretending, and by learning to stand even when no one applauds. Her eyes lifted to mine slowly. Can I stay here tonight? The question lingered in the air, fragile and genuine. I took her hands gently in mine. You may stay tonight, but understand this is not an escape. This is a pause. Tomorrow we talk about what comes next. She nodded, shoulders trembling in relief. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for solutions. She asked for space. And that was the first step toward the daughter I always believed she could be. I guided her to the guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the simple quilt, the small lamp, the soft blue walls. She looked like a person seeing a safe place for the first time. Before I turned to leave, she whispered, Mom, thank you for not answering my earlier messages. I paused in the doorway. Why do you say that? Because if you had answered, she whispered, I would have hidden again. I closed the door slowly, my heart full and aching all at once. Tonight wasn't victory. Tonight was vulnerability, and Christmas was not over yet. That night, the house felt fuller than it had in years, not because of laughter or celebration, but because of the quiet presence of a daughter who was finally learning how to stand without leaning on illusion. The wind pushed softly against the windows, a low, steady hum like an old lullaby. I walked through the hallway outside the guest room, pausing for a moment at her door. A faint strip of warm yellow light glowed beneath it. She wasn't asleep. I could hear the soft, rhythmic rustle of her moving around, perhaps pacing, perhaps thinking, perhaps trying to gather the scattered pieces of herself into something she could live with. I didn't knock. She needed time with her own thoughts, time she had avoided for years by drowning herself in social events, curated photos, meaningless luxuries, and people who clapped for the shiny parts of her while ignoring the fractured ones. I went to bed early, though sleep didn't come quickly. My mind played through her words, the ones she whispered with trembling honesty, admitting she didn't know who she was anymore. That confession lingered in my heart like something both devastating and hopeful. I had waited so long for her to reach this point, the point where truth mattered more than appearances, where vulnerability mattered more than approval, where reality mattered more than the fantasy she chased. As I lay in the dark, staring at the faint glow of the night light in the hallway, I understood that what she needed next wasn't comfort. It was direction. Not the kind I once gave when she was little, gently guiding her hand as she learned to write her name, but the kind that comes from letting her walk through every ache she had avoided. Eventually, I drifted into sleep, only to wake abruptly in the middle of the night. Something felt off, not wrong, but unsettled. I slipped out of bed quietly and walked to the kitchen for water. The house was still, the air cool, the moon casting a pale glow across the hardwood floor. As I reached the sink, I heard a soft sound coming from the living room. Not crying, not movement, something quieter. I stepped closer and found her sitting on the couch, wrapped in the old knitted blanket I made years ago, legs pulled to her chest, staring at the Christmas lights like they held answers she couldn't articulate. She didn't notice me at first. She looked hollowed out, like someone who had shed a shell but didn't yet know how to live without it. Her fingers traced the edge of the blanket absent-mindedly, as though she were touching memory itself. I didn't want to startle her, so I approached slowly. "You're awake," I said softly. She looked up, startled, wiping her cheek as if embarrassed by her own emotions. Yes, I couldn't sleep. I tried. My mind just kept circling. I sat down in the chair across from her, the soft light reflecting off her tired eyes. "Do you want to talk?" She hesitated, her throat working around words she wasn't sure she wanted to release. Then she took a deep breath and nodded. "Mom, I think I've been living someone else's life." The confession came out painfully slow, like each word had to fight its way through layers of denial. She looked at the floor, her voice trembling. I kept thinking that if I acted confident enough, rich enough, fashionable enough, people would respect me, that they'd want me, that I'd finally feel like I belonged somewhere. But the truth is, I've never felt more alone than when I was pretending. She swallowed hard, even with him, especially with him. I didn't interrupt. She needed to hear her own voice unravel the truth. She continued, her voice soft. Today, when his family looked at me, I could see it. The expectation. The performance they wanted from me. The perfect partner. The polished girl. The one who never makes mistakes. The one who never comes from something small or simple. The one who fits into their picture. And I realized I'd been trying to fit into that picture too. I'd been cutting pieces off myself just to make space for a role I wasn't meant to play. Her voice cracked and she covered her face with her hands. "I don't want to be that person anymore, Mom. I don't want to lie. I don't want to hide you. I don't want to pretend I'm better than where I came from. I don't want to spend my life exhausted from performing. I'm tired. I'm so tired." I took a breath, letting her words settle between us. "Then stop performing." She lowered her hands, her eyes glassy but searching. "How, Mom? How do I stop when I don't even know how to just be myself anymore?" I leaned forward, my voice steady and quiet, grounded in the kind of truth I had learned through years of struggle and resilience. "You start by accepting that you are not defined by the people you want to impress. You are defined by the choices you make when no one is watching. And tonight, sitting here with your hair messy and your heart open, you are more yourself than you've been in years. This honesty, this is who you are." She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself, shivering. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Good," I said gently. "Fear means you are finally stepping into the unknown instead of holding on to what hurts you." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she had expected comfort but received revelation instead. "So what happens next?" she whispered. "Tomorrow morning," I answered, "your real life begins." She swallowed, emotions trembling through her voice. "And what does that look like?" I held her gaze. "It looks like you learning to live in your own truth. It looks like conversations you don't want to have. It looks like taking responsibility for what you built out of lies. It looks like letting go of people who only love the version of you that performs. It looks like rebuilding relationships you neglected. It looks like waking up without pretending." Her breath shuddered. "And what about him?" I let out a slow breath. "That depends entirely on whether he loves you or the image of you." She closed her eyes as if the possibility itself was painful. "I think he loves the image," she whispered. "Not me." "Then you already know your answer." Silence settled between us, thick and heavy but not suffocating. She opened her eyes again, her voice trembling with something deeper. "Mom, I don't know if he ever loved me, and I don't know if I ever really loved him. I think I loved who he made me feel like. Someone impressive, someone worth looking at, someone shiny." She looked away, her voice flattening. "But today I saw how quickly shiny people will drop you when the light hits you wrong." I nodded slowly. "That is because shiny is not real, solid is real. And solid is what you are learning to become." Her tears came again, but softer this time, as if each one carried a piece of her old self away. She wiped her cheeks and whispered, "What if I have nothing left by the time I'm done breaking?" I reached out and placed my hand on hers. "Then you will finally have space to build something truthful." Her breath caught. "You're not angry," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, anger is shallow. I am something deeper. I am invested. I am watching you pull yourself out of the life that was drowning you." Her shoulders sagged, but not in defeat. In relief. "Mom," she whispered, "will you stay with me while I figure this out?" I squeezed her hand gently. "Always. But I will not live your life for you again. I will walk beside you, not in front of you." She nodded, tears falling again. "Thank you for letting me come back tonight." I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You didn't come back to escape." You came back to begin. There is a difference. She let out a long, trembling breath as if she had been holding it for years. She leaned back against the couch, eyes drifting toward the twinkling lights, the soft glow reflecting off her exhaustion and her awakening. Mom, she whispered, do you think I can really change? I looked at her, at the girl she had been, at the woman she was becoming, at the cracks and the courage and the quiet determination growing inside her like the first green sprout pushing through cold soil. I do not think you can, I said softly. Her face fell for a moment, then I continued, I know you will. Her breath hitched with a sound that was not quite a cry, not quite a laugh. Something in between, something new, something healing. She stood slowly, wrapped the blanket around herself, and whispered, I'm going to try to sleep now. I nodded. Good, tomorrow will be a long day. She paused in the doorway of the hallway, her silhouette framed by the dim light and the soft shimmer of Christmas. She turned back to me, her voice raw and small. Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. I smiled gently. You gave up on yourself long before I ever came close. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes, then disappeared into the darkness of the hall. I listened to her footsteps retreating, the soft click of her door closing, the quiet settling once more across the house. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the lights, letting the weight of the night settle around me. I could feel something shifting, something breaking, something healing. Tomorrow we would face the consequences. Tomorrow she would confront the truth fully. Tomorrow the real transformation would begin. But tonight she slept in a safe place for the first time in years, and that was enough. The morning arrived slowly, creeping across the sky in muted shades of gray that made the world look as if it were holding its breath. I woke before the sun fully rose, the house cold but steady, the silence thick in a way that made every sound feel amplified. For a moment, I simply lay there, listening to the soft hum of the heater and the faint rustle of branches outside brushing against each other in the winter wind. My first thought was of her, not out of habit but out of awareness. She was in the next room, not because she wanted comfort or escape, but because she had finally stopped performing and allowed herself to break in a place where she could begin again. I rose quietly and stepped into the hallway, pausing in front of her door. A thin strip of light glowed beneath it. She was awake. I could hear the soft sound of movement, the light shift of fabric, the breath of someone trying to piece themselves together before stepping into the world. I made tea in the kitchen, the steam fogging the window as I watched the snow settle softly over the yard. The trees were heavy with frost, branches bending under the weight of winter's insistence. The whole world looked fragile yet resilient, a reflection of the transformation happening under my roof. When she finally emerged from the hallway, her steps were slow and deliberate, her shoulders wrapped in the blanket she carried from last night. Her hair was pulled back, her face bare, her eyes swollen but clear, and there was something new in her expression. Not confidence, not desperation, something quieter, something honest, something humbled. She sat at the table without speaking at first, her fingers curled around the warm mug I placed in front of her, as if she needed the heat to remind herself she was still here. After a long moment, she whispered that she didn't recognize the person she had been yesterday. She said it quietly, her voice trembling like a child afraid of the dark, but her eyes held a clarity she hadn't possessed in years. I watched her, really watched her, the way a gardener watches the first fragile sprout push through cold soil. She wasn't asking for rescue. She wasn't hiding behind excuses. She was simply sitting in the truth of what she had become and what she could become. She took a deep breath and explained what had happened after she left his parents' house, each detail unraveling the illusion she had lived within. She said when she walked out barefoot into the snow, feeling the ice bite her skin, something inside her snapped. She realized she had built her identity on the approval of people who didn't know her, didn't value her, didn't love her. She told me how she sat in her car for almost an hour, shivering and shaking, as the weight of the truth finally fell on her shoulders. She said she saw herself reflected in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize the girl staring back. That girl had chased validation at the cost of dignity. That girl had cared more about looking perfect than being whole. That girl had traded authenticity for applause. When she whispered that she no longer wanted to be that girl, her voice cracked with a mixture of grief and relief. She told me she wanted to break up with him. The words came out hesitant at first, as if she feared them, but then they steadied. She said she realized he didn't love her. He loved the version of her that matched his family's expectations. He loved the performance, the mask, the curated girl who never confronted him, The girl who apologized when he raised his voice. The girl who smoothed over every conflict because she feared losing his approval. She admitted she hadn't been in love either. She had been in love with the idea of belonging, with the idea of rising socially, with the illusion of being chosen by someone who seemed powerful. She said the moment he told her she embarrassed him was the moment she saw the truth sharply, painfully, completely. She looked at me with raw eyes and whispered that she had never wanted a life built on fear. When she finished speaking, silence filled the kitchen. A silence not of discomfort, but of settling truth. She stared into her mug as though searching for something in the steam. I waited, letting the moment stretch until she finally lifted her gaze and said she didn't know how to rebuild her life. She didn't know how to take responsibility. She didn't know how to be honest with people. She didn't know how to face herself. She didn't know how to be grounded without noise to distract her. Her voice cracked again as she admitted she had no job, no money, no stability, no partner, no plan. She said she felt like a child again, only this time without the innocence or the sense of wonder. I reached for her hand gently, feeling the tremble in her fingers. I told her she didn't need to have a perfectly structured plan. She only needed to take the next honest step. One decision at a time, one truth at a time, one responsibility at a time. I told her she needed to accept the past without drowning in it. She needed to confront the mistakes without defining herself by them. She needed to walk through discomfort instead of running from it. And most importantly, she needed to apologize to herself as much as she needed to apologize to others. She let out a shaky breath, her shoulders dropping as though she had been holding tension for years. She whispered that she wanted to rebuild, not from illusion but from integrity. We sat there for a long while, letting the tea cool and the morning deepen. Then she asked a question that made my throat tighten. She asked if I could help her find a place to start. Not money, not shortcuts, not safety nets, guidance, structure, a foundation she could stand on without sinking. I thought about it carefully before answering. Then I told her the truth, that tomorrow she would begin job hunting, that she would start from the bottom, that she would accept work that tested her pride, that she would learn to manage her own money, that she would rebuild trust slowly, that she would face every uncomfortable conversation she avoided, that she would call her landlord, her creditors, her friends, and own what she had done. She nodded slowly, almost reverently, accepting it all with a subdued strength. Then she said she wanted to live independently, not in the apartment I paid for, not in the life I upheld for her, but in something sustainable. I told her that was possible, but only if she committed to building a life, not performing one. Her lips trembled, but her eyes held steady. She asked if she could stay with me for a few weeks while she stabilized. I looked at her carefully, knowing that this moment mattered deeply. I told her she could stay for 1 week and then we would reevaluate. Not because I didn't want her near me, but because I wanted her to learn that home was not a retreat from accountability. Her breath left her in a shuddering sigh, but she nodded, accepting the boundary instead of resisting it. That alone told me how much she had changed already. After breakfast, she disappeared into the guest room for a while, and when she emerged, she was wearing simple clothes, her hair tied back cleanly, her face calm. She asked if we could take down the Christmas decorations together. It was an unexpected request. She had never cared about the process, only the aesthetics, but now she wanted the quiet work, she wanted the grounding, she wanted something real. We spent the rest of the morning packing ornaments into boxes, folding the tree skirt, and taking down the garland from the mantel. She worked silently, methodically, carefully, as though each action was a form of penance. I watched her sometimes, not intrusively, but with growing awareness that the woman standing in my living room was not the same woman who had stood at my door 2 nights before. Something inside her was shifting, softening, strengthening. When we finished, the house felt strangely bare, but also peaceful. She stood there looking at the empty tree corner, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered that she felt lighter, not happy, not relieved, but lighter, as if the weight she had carried from years of pretending had finally loosened its grip. She walked to the window and stared outside at the snow, her breath fogging the glass. Then she asked quietly if we could go for a walk. We bundled up and stepped outside into the cold air, the snow crunching beneath our boots. The sky was a soft pale gray, soft flakes drifting down lazily as though tired from the night before. She walked beside me in silence, not speaking, not rushing, not performing, just being. The world around us was quiet, the trees still heavy with frost, the houses on the street glowing faintly with leftover holiday lights. She stopped at the end of the driveway and looked around, her breath forming small clouds. She whispered that she felt like she was seeing everything again for the first time. We walked slowly down the road, her pace careful, her eyes taking in every detail of the world she had ignored when life was loud and crowded with expectations. She asked about things she never noticed before: the neighbor's old oak tree, the chipped fence near the corner, the soft hum of the river beyond the woods. She was rediscovering simplicity, humility, presence. As we neared the end of the street, she stopped suddenly, turning to face me with a look so honest it almost unraveled me. She said she was ready to end things with him. She said she was ready to return the gifts she couldn't afford. She said she was ready to tell the truth to the people she lied to. She said she was ready to take responsibility for everything she had run from. She said she was ready to work, to sweat, to earn, to grow. To rebuild trust not by promising, but by showing. She took a breath that trembled through her entire body. Then she said, "Mom, I want to learn how to live the way you do. Real, not perfect, just real." In that moment, I saw the child she had been, the woman she was becoming, and the mother I had always hoped she would one day be able to become herself. Her transformation wasn't complete, not even close, but the beginning had finally taken root. And beginnings, I knew, were often more important than endings. We turned back toward the house, the cold brushing our cheeks, the silence between us warm and full of meaning. She didn't take my arm, she didn't cling. She walked beside me step for step, her posture straight, her gaze forward. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, new challenges, new steps, but today marked the moment she finally met herself without fear, and I had never been prouder. The next morning arrived with a piercing clarity, the kind that only comes after nights heavy with truth. And as I opened my bedroom door, the house felt different, not lighter or happier, but steadier, as if the walls themselves had adjusted to the new shape of her presence. She was already awake, standing at the kitchen counter with a notebook I didn't recognize, her hair pulled back, her posture tense with purpose, the steam from the mug beside her curling upward like a whisper of determination. She had been writing, long lines of small, anxious handwriting filling half the page. When she looked up and saw me, there was no performative smile, no eager explanation, just a quiet nod of acknowledgement, the kind that comes from someone who has finally stopped trying to impress and has begun to understand the impossible relief of simply being seen. She pushed the notebook toward me and stepped back. I glanced down and felt something tighten in my chest. It wasn't dramatic or poetic or polished. It was a list. A plain, raw list of everything she needed to confront, talk to landlord, call credit card company, apologize to Anna. Return borrowed money to Cassie, break up with him, tell the truth, find job, learn budget, buy groceries with my own money, learn to cook basics, build routine, stop lying, be honest with mom. The last line was scribbled twice, as if she had pressed the pen harder the second time, making sure the commitment etched itself into her consciousness. She whispered that she didn't trust herself yet, but she was ready to try, and that alone made the morning feel sacred. I told her we could start with one task, not 10, because people do not rebuild themselves in a day, but decision by decision. And she nodded, gripping the mug with both hands as if she needed the warmth to hold herself together. We sat at the table as she composed the first message she needed to send, the breakup text. She asked if she should call him, and I shook my head gently. A conversation with a man who valued control over compassion would pull her back into confusion. She needed clarity today. She typed slowly, stopping often, deleting, rewriting, breathing heavily as the truth began to form. She wrote that she didn't want a relationship where she pretended to be someone else, where love was measured by appearances, where her mistakes were punishable offenses instead of moments to grow. She wrote that she needed honesty, stability, respect, and he had never offered those things. She thanked him for the moments that had felt real, but explained she could no longer shape herself to fit his expectations. When she hit send, her shoulders sagged as if a weight had been removed, but the fear lingered in her eyes. Minutes later, his reply arrived. Long and furious, filled with accusations blaming her for embarrassing him, accusing her of being dramatic, suggesting she would come crawling back. Once she calmed down, saying his family was laughing about her meltdown, and that she was lucky he tolerated her insecurities for as long as he did. She flinched when she read it but did not cry. She simply closed her eyes and whispered that she had expected cruelty, but it still stung. I told her that his reaction was proof she had made the right decision. Love does not shame. Love does not mock. Love does not require masks. She nodded slowly, breathing through the ache as she deleted his number without hesitation. For the first time since she was a teenager, she cut off someone who wasn't good for her without asking me to justify it. That alone told me how far she had come. By late morning, she was ready for the next step, calling her landlord. Her hands trembled as she dialed, her voice wavering as she admitted she was breaking the lease early and understood the penalties. She asked if there was a way to create a payment plan instead of defaulting. The landlord, surprisingly patient, said he appreciated her honesty and would work with her. When she hung up, relief washed over her face in waves, but so did shame, because she finally understood how much she had taken for granted. She whispered that she had avoided that call for months, hiding from consequences behind luxuries she couldn't afford. She took a deep breath and moved to the next item, apologizing to the friend she had lied to. She typed the message carefully, admitting she had borrowed money under false pretenses, admitting she had played victim to avoid accountability, admitting she had used friendship as a tool instead of protecting it. She did not defend herself. She simply told the truth and asked what repayment plan her friend wanted. When she hit send, her breath trembled again. Minutes later, the friend responded with a short message. I appreciate the apology. Pay me back when you can. I hope you figure things out. The neutrality was painful, but she understood it. Trust didn't return easily. Repair didn't arrive with one message. She accepted it, shoulders stiff but steady. She moved to the next line, telling the truth to a friend she had impressed with lies. She sent a voice message this time, her voice trembling as she admitted she didn't have the money, didn't live the life she portrayed online, didn't have the perfect family background she pretended to. She admitted she had let insecurity warp her decisions. When she ended the recording, she pressed the phone to her forehead as tears filled her eyes, not from humiliation but from release. There is a particular kind of relief that only truth can bring after years of hiding. She was tasting it for the first time. She spent the next hour making more calls, more apologies, more arrangements, exposing layers of her past with each act of honesty. And though each conversation scraped against her pride, I watched her grow taller inside. I could feel the change in the air around her, in the way she held the phone, in the way she spoke without bending her voice into sweetness to gain approval, in the way she breathed more deeply after each call. By the time she reached the bottom of her list, her hands were still shaking, but her eyes were clear. Then came the hardest part of the day, removing the illusions she built online. She took her phone, opened her social media accounts, and looked at the curated grid of polished photos, expensive experiences, staged smiles, borrowed luxuries, and captions dripping with artificial confidence. She stared at the screen with a mixture of grief and disbelief. She whispered that she didn't even recognize the girl in the photos. She didn't know who she had been trying to impress. She didn't know why she had spent years presenting a life she couldn't afford. With trembling fingers, she began to delete photo after photo. Luxury bag borrowed from a friend, deleted. Restaurant she couldn't pay for, deleted. Vacation she never took, deleted. Her account grew emptier, rawer, more honest. When she reached the last few photos, she hesitated. Photos of her and him, carefully staged smiles, matching outfits, illusion of perfect romance. She stared at them for a long time, her jaw tightening, then deleted every single one without looking back. When the screen displayed only a handful of real moments, she set her phone down on the table and closed her eyes, exhaling deeply as if releasing the ghost of a life that had been suffocating her. She whispered something then, something soft and fragile. I feel exposed. I sat with her in that truth, letting her know exposure wasn't weakness. It was rebirth. We spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning the guest room she had stayed in, not because I asked her, but because she wanted to. She folded the blankets, smoothed the sheets, dusted the corners. She wanted to treat the space with respect. She wanted to show gratitude through action. She wanted to care for something instead of consuming it. When she finished, she stood in the doorway for a long moment, her expression both somber and hopeful, as if she were saying goodbye to a version of herself she no longer intended to become again. Later, as the winter light faded and the house settled into evening quiet, she came to me again with her notebook pressed against her chest. She asked if she could create a second list, not of consequences this time, but of intentions. I nodded and she sat at the table, writing slowly with lips parted in concentration. When she finished, she handed me the page. Learn to live within my means. Cook simple meals, be honest with the people I love. Repair trust one step at a time. Ask for help when I am overwhelmed. Work hard, speak slowly when I am upset, become someone I respect. Love mom with more than words. Build a life I am not ashamed of. Become solid. The list was imperfect. The handwriting shaky. But the intention was the most beautiful thing she had given me in years. That night, she didn't retreat to the guest room immediately. She stayed with me in the living room, sitting on the floor beside my chair, leaning her back against my leg the way she used to as a child, silent but present. The Christmas lights were packed away, but the house still held their memory, a soft echo of warmth in the corners. She rested her head against my knee, her breathing slow and steady, and whispered that she wasn't ready for tomorrow, but she was willing. And willingness, I knew, was the doorway to transformation. I stroked her hair gently, feeling the tremble beneath her skin, and told her tomorrow we would begin building something real. Not glamour, not performance, not illusion. A foundation she could stand on. She whispered that she wanted that more than anything. And as she fell asleep beside my chair, curled beneath a blanket of vulnerability and truth, I realized something profound. This wasn't her breaking point anymore. This was her turning point. She had finally stopped running. She had finally started becoming. And tomorrow, the world would test her new strength. But tonight, she slept safely, softly, and honestly. For the first time in a long time. Christmas morning arrived with a quiet dignity, the kind that comes after storms have passed, but the earth is still soaked. And when I opened my eyes, the house felt warmer than it had all month, not because of decorations or candles or the smell of cinnamon, but because she was breathing in the next room steady and calm, no longer hiding behind lies or borrowed pride. I rose slowly, letting the soft creak of the floorboards announce my steps, and when I reached the kitchen, I saw her sitting at the table wrapped in a blanket, her hair messy, her cheeks flushed with the sleep of someone who finally rested without fear. She wasn't scrolling her phone or pretending to be busy. She was simply existing, hands cupped around a mug of tea she had brewed herself, the steam rising through the pale winter light like something sacred. She looked up when she heard me approach and offered me a small, fragile smile, the kind that isn't performed or polished but born from gratitude. She said she wasn't sure how today was supposed to go, wasn't sure if she deserved a Christmas morning with me after everything she had done, but she wanted to be present, wanted to learn how to rebuild traditions she had abandoned when she replaced family with aesthetic. I sat across from her, telling her Christmas wasn't something she needed to earn, it was something she needed to understand, that the holiday wasn't about gifts or photos or performances, but about sitting at a table with someone whose love endured even when she tried to push it away. She swallowed hard at that, blinking back tears, and told me she wanted today to be real. No pretending, no perfect pictures, just truth. We spent the morning quietly, cooking breakfast side by side, her reading instructions carefully, terrified of messing up but smiling shyly when the scrambled eggs actually turned out fluffy. She whispered that she had spent so much time chasing glamorous meals, she forgot the comfort of a simple breakfast made with care. We ate together without the pressure of performing, without the tension of hidden resentment. She told me stories from years she had never admitted she struggled through. Stories of nights she cried alone because she didn't want me to think she was weak, stories of friendships she lost, because she couldn't keep up with their lifestyles, stories of nights. She stayed awake, terrified of debt collectors, terrified of her partner's temper, terrified of being found out as a fraud. As she spoke, she trembled, but she didn't stop. She poured truth like water through a cracked dam, letting everything spill until the weight she carried finally diffused through the air between us. I didn't interrupt. I didn't scold. I listened. Because sometimes listening is the only gift a parent can give a child who has been drowning in silence for years. When she finished, she looked exhausted but lighter, as if confession itself had peeled back layers of accumulated pain. After breakfast, she surprised me again. She walked into the living room holding a small paper envelope, worn at the edges, clearly folded and unfolded many times. She handed it to me with trembling hands and told me she made something for me, something she couldn't buy but wanted to give with sincerity. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages long, her words, uneven and emotional, apologizing, without excuse, admitting. She had built her life on mirrors and shadows, admitting. She had pushed me away, not because she didn't love me, but because she was ashamed of needing me. Ashamed of her own insufficiency, ashamed of not being the glamorous daughter she thought I deserved. She wrote that she now understood I never wanted a perfect daughter. I wanted a present daughter, a truthful daughter, a daughter with a backbone instead of a mask. She ended the letter with a sentence that broke me open in the quietest possible way. She wrote that she wanted to earn my trust, not through money or success or status, but through small daily choices, through showing up, through working, through trying, through becoming someone she could look in the mirror and not run from. I folded the letter and held her hand, telling her she had already taken the first step the moment she walked through my door without expecting comfort as currency. And then came the moment that sealed everything. She looked toward the hallway where her suitcase sat packed with the few things she had left and asked if she could stay. Not as a guest, not as a dependent, but as someone rebuilding her life from the inside out. She said she didn't want me to fund her anymore. She didn't want the old arrangement where she called me only when things fell apart. She wanted a new relationship, a partnership built on honesty and responsibility. She asked if she could work part-time until she found something steady. She asked if she could contribute to groceries. She asked if she could learn how to budget properly. She asked if I could teach her the skills she should have learned earlier but never bothered to because everything had always been handed to her. Her voice wavered as she spoke, hoping she wasn't overstepping, terrified I would say she wasn't ready, terrified I would say she hadn't earned it, but I simply told her the truth that this house had always been hers. Not because she was entitled to it, but because family wasn't a location she could lose. It was a responsibility she was finally ready to carry. We stepped outside onto the porch later, the snow freshly fallen, unbroken, quiet as a held breath. She inhaled the cold air, letting it fill her, washing her clean in a way no apology could. She whispered that last Christmas she thought she was at the top of her life, surrounded by gifts and people and lights, and yet she had never felt lonelier. This Christmas, with nothing but a small breakfast and a handwritten letter and the truth between us, she felt whole. She placed her hand in mine, not as a plea, not as a manipulation, but as a choice. A choice to stay, a choice to grow, a choice to be the daughter she had forgotten how to be. Inside, near the tree we never decorated, near the light that flickered weakly from the old lamp, she looked at me and said a sentence that made everything in me soften. She said thank you for letting the money stop so I could finally start. And in that moment, in the quiet warmth of Christmas morning, I realized something profound. Cutting her off had not been an act of cruelty. It had been the first act of real love she had ever been forced to face. She had learned the value of effort. She had understood the weight of consequence. She had felt the sting of loneliness created by her own choices. And she had walked back toward connection with humility instead of expectation. She didn't just come home, she showed up. She didn't just ask for forgiveness. She earned it. She didn't just rebuild her life. She started rebuilding herself. And as I held her hand in the soft morning light, I finally understood that sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give a child is not comfort, not money, not rescue, but the chance to rise from their own ashes with dignity. That Christmas, I didn't get gifts. I got my daughter back, and she was worth more than anything money could buy. If this story hit you in the chest, if it reminded you that love isn't measured by gifts but by accountability and truth, then make sure you tap that like button and subscribe. Some lessons hurt, some lessons heal, but the ones that change us forever usually start when the excuses stop. Follow this channel for more raw, real stories about family, redemption, justice, and the moments that force us to grow up. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.